There comes a moment in every woman's life when she begins to feel an invisible pull, a whisper from deep within that says, "There's more." It's not a loud voice, not a command, but a subtle knowing that rises from the silence of her own being. For years, she may have lived by the world's definitions, the titles, the roles, the expectations. She became the daughter who pleased, the partner who gave, the worker who endured, the dreamer who waited. Yet, beneath all those masks, there remained something untouched, in essence, pure and radiant, that never bowed to the noise of the world. The journey from dreams to reality begins the very moment she turns inward and decides to meet that essence again. That is the awakening of the inner queen. It often begins not in triumph, but in exhaustion, when the striving, the chasing, and the proving finally lose their meaning. She finds herself standing at the edge of her own soul, asking, "Who am I if I stop pretending?" The mind, conditioned by years of comparison and validation, will try to answer with labels. But the queen within does not speak in words. She speaks in presence. She waits patiently beneath the noise, beneath the fear, beneath the illusion that happiness must be earned. When she begins to quiet her thoughts and listen, she doesn't discover something new. She remembers something eternal. That remembrance feels like coming home. It is not the learning of a new truth, but the recognition of an ancient one. In that stillness, she realizes she is not her story. She is not the mistakes she made, nor the pain she carried, nor the love she lost. Those were chapters, not her essence. She begins to sense that every experience, even the ones that once broke her, were designed to awaken her. Every disappointment was a teacher. Every heartbreak a sacred mirror showing her the parts of herself she had abandoned. The awakening is not about becoming more. It is about shedding what was never hers to begin with. The guilt, the self-doubt, the inherited fears. Each time she lets go of a false identity, she rises a little higher in her own kingdom of consciousness. The queen's awakening is not loud. It doesn't announce itself to the world. It happens quietly, in moments no one else sees, when she chooses peace over proving, forgiveness over resentment, intuition over insecurity. These small acts of awareness are the seeds of transformation. She begins to understand that her outer world was never separate from her inner one, that her life was always a reflection of what she believed herself to be. When she lived as a servant to her fears, her reality mirrored limitation. But as she begins to live as the queen of her own mind, her reality starts to shift, subtly at first, then profoundly. The first sign of awakening is awareness. She becomes aware of the voice in her head that says she's not enough, and for the first time, she doesn't obey it. She watches it. That single act of awareness severs the control of the old self. She no longer reacts unconsciously. She observes consciously. This is how she begins to reclaim her power. Every thought she witnesses without judgment. Every emotion she allows without resistance becomes a step toward liberation. She starts to see that she has always been the observer, the consciousness behind the experiences, not the experiences themselves. And in that realization, she feels something she hasn't felt in years: sovereignty. As she continues to turn inward, her perception of reality begins to change. What once seemed external and fixed now feels fluid and responsive. She notices how her thoughts shape her mood, how her mood shapes her actions, and how her actions create her reality. She begins to understand the divine equation of creation, that the world outside is simply mirroring the vibration she holds within. When she feels unworthy, life mirrors rejection. When she feels abundant, life mirrors opportunity. This realization does not make her arrogant. It makes her responsible. She starts to treat every thought as sacred, every emotion as creative energy. Her mind is no longer a battlefield. It becomes a temple. In this temple, the queen learns to listen to the language of her soul. It doesn't speak in logic or reason. It speaks in resonance. What feels light is aligned. What feels heavy is a call to release. She no longer seeks validation from the outside world because she has found something far more powerful: self-awareness. It becomes her compass. When she moves from that awareness, her decisions are no longer reactions to fear, but responses to truth. Her confidence no longer depends on outcomes because it flows from her being, not her doing. As her awareness deepens, she begins to notice how everything around her responds to her inner state. People treat her differently, not because they changed, but because she did. Opportunities appear not because they were created from nothing, but because her energy finally became a match for them. The queen understands that her reality was never waiting for her to work harder. It was waiting for her to wake up. The awakening of the inner queen is the moment she stops asking life to give her what she wants and starts becoming the energy of what she desires. She no longer chases love. She becomes love. She no longer waits for peace. She embodies peace. And in doing so, she begins to see the beauty in everything, even in the moments that once made her doubt her worth. Her crown is invisible, yet its power is unmistakable. It shines not because she dominates the world, but because she has mastered herself. The world outside her may look the same job, the same city, the same people, but she knows something profound has shifted. She no longer looks for meaning in the things she owns or the approval she earns. Her meaning comes from within, from that unshakable knowing that she is both the dreamer and the dream. What she once sought through control, she now finds through surrender. What she once tried to prove, she now simply embodies. And as she continues her journey within, she realizes that awakening was never about becoming a queen. It was about remembering that she already was. When there is a spell that most of humanity lives under, a spell woven not by magic, but by repetition, belief, and fear. It begins in childhood when we are told what's possible and what isn't. When we are rewarded for fitting in and corrected for standing out, slowly, almost unconsciously, we learn to measure our potential by the approval of others. We internalize their opinions until they become our own voice. That voice whispers through the corridors of the mind, "You're not enough. You're too late. You're not ready." It repeats itself so often that we stop questioning it. We start to believe that the voice is us. This is the spell of limitation, and until we awaken from it, we keep creating the same life over and over again. Different days, same story. Breaking this spell is not about defiance. It is about awareness. A queen begins her liberation the moment she stops identifying with those inherited beliefs. She starts to ask, who decided what I'm capable of? Who told me what was realistic? And as she begins to trace these ideas back to their origins, parents, teachers, society, culture, she realizes something profound. Most of her limitations were never hers. They were borrowed from others who had borrowed them from others, passed down like invisible chains through generations. The moment she sees this truth, even for an instant, she feels the first crack in the illusion. That is the beginning of her freedom. The human mind is a powerful servant, but a poor master. It records every past experience and projects it into the future, creating a predictable pattern. The mind says, because this happened before, it will happen again. That's how the spell strengthens, by convincing us that the past equals the future. But the queen begins to see through this illusion. She understands that the mind is not a prophet. It's a program. It can only create from what it knows. If she wants to create something beyond her current reality, she must begin to think beyond her current mind. That means stepping into the unknown, the space where logic ends and possibility begins. This is where courage becomes her crown. The unknown feels uncomfortable because the body has memorized limitation as safety. The queen's body may resist, her heart may race, her thoughts may protest, but she learns to stay present with the discomfort. She breathes through it instead of retreating from it. She begins to understand that the discomfort is not danger, it's expansion. Every time she chooses awareness over fear, she's reprogramming her body to trust the unknown. That's how she begins to rewrite her destiny, not through willpower, but through energetic realignment. Thoughts are not random. They are frequencies, each one carrying a vibration that broadcasts into the field around her. The queen begins to notice that every thought she holds consistently is like a command sent out into the universe. If she thinks in lack, she draws more lack. If she thinks in abundance, she opens the gates for more to flow in. She realizes that her reality was never punishing her. It was reflecting her. What she sees around her is nothing more than the echo of what she believes within her. Once she truly understands this, limitation loses its grip because she no longer sees herself as a victim of circumstance. She becomes the architect of energy, consciously designing the blueprint of her own future. To break the spell, she must learn to watch her thoughts with the eyes of a witness. Every time an old pattern arises, the thought that says she can't, that she shouldn't, that she doesn't deserve, she pauses. She observes it, not with judgment, but with awareness. There is a hidden science within every human heart. It's an unspoken language that shapes the invisible threads of reality, emotion. Most people think emotion is just a reaction, a byproduct of what happens to them. But for the awakened queen, emotion becomes creation itself. She begins to understand that emotion is not something that happens to her. It is something she can generate, something she can direct. It is the bridge between thought and manifestation, between the invisible and the visible. To master her emotions is to master her destiny. The journey into emotional alchemy begins when she realizes that her emotions are not random. Every feeling she has ever experienced was a signal, a vibration that informed the universe of what frequency she was tuned to. The universe doesn't respond to words or wishes. It responds to energy, and emotion is the purest form of that energy. When she feels despair, her body radiates a frequency that draws more of the same. When she feels joy or gratitude, her vibration rises and her world reorganizes around that elevated state. Emotion is the magnet that pulls her future into form. The queen learns that she cannot create a new life while feeling the same old emotions. She cannot dream of freedom while her body is anchored in fear. She cannot call in love while she still feels unworthy. To create a new reality, she must first feel it into existence. The first step in this transformation is awareness. She begins to notice her emotional patterns, not to judge them, but to understand them. When she feels anger, she pauses and listens to what it is trying to reveal. When sadness visits, she doesn't suppress it or distract herself. She observes it as an alchemist would study a substance, curious about its nature and purpose. She starts to see emotion not as an enemy, but as energy in motion, a teacher that points her toward what still needs to be healed. This awareness is the foundation of emotional mastery. It gives her back the power she once gave away to external circumstances. As she practices this awareness, she learns the art of shifting. She discovers that emotions are not permanent. They are frequencies that can be changed through intention. The queen begins to experiment with the power of gratitude. Even in moments of challenge, she finds something to appreciate the lesson, the growth, the resilience it brings. Gratitude becomes her first tool of transmutation. It takes what once felt heavy and turns it into wisdom. She learns that she doesn't need to wait for things to get better to feel grateful. She feels grateful first, and then things get better. That is the essence of emotional alchemy, to embody the emotion of the future before it arrives. The process is not about pretending everything is perfect. It's about training the body to experience emotions that align with her desired reality. The queen understands that the body is a record of the past. Every memory, every emotional reaction has left its imprint on her nervous system. When she repeats the same emotional responses day after day, stress, worry, doubt, her body becomes addicted to those feelings. They become her identity. To break that addiction, she must introduce new emotions, new chemicals, new states of being. She begins to meditate, to breathe, to visualize, not as a ritual of escape, but as a ritual of creation. Each time she feels genuine joy or love without a reason, she teaches her body a new way of existing. Her biology begins to change, her chemistry rebalances, and her energy field expands. Emotion becomes her language with the divine. When she thinks of her dreams and feels them with all her heart, she is speaking directly to the field of infinite intelligence. The queen learns that thought sends the signal out, but feeling draws the experience back in. She starts to feel her future as if it is already here, not as imagination, but as reality unfolding through her energy. This is where the magic happens. The body, unable to distinguish between imagination and experience, begins to align with that new vibration. The cells, the hormones, the nervous system, Everything starts to respond to that elevated state. Her energy becomes a magnet for new experiences that match her internal emotion. The queen also begins to understand the importance of coherence. When her mind and heart are out of sync, when her thoughts say one thing but her emotions feel another, creation becomes fragmented. But when she aligns the two, when her thoughts of possibility are matched with feelings of gratitude and love, her energy becomes whole. This coherence is not a concept. It's a measurable state of harmony where her heart's rhythm synchronizes with her brain's frequency. In that state, she moves from survival to creation. Her energy field expands, influencing not just her body, but everything around her. People respond differently. Events unfold effortlessly. Synchronicities multiply. She is no longer pushing against life. She is flowing with it. The alchemy of emotion is also the alchemy of identity. The queen realizes that her emotions are the foundation of who she believes herself to be. If she lives in fear, she becomes someone who must control. If she lives in love, she becomes someone who inspires. By consciously choosing her emotions, she chooses her identity. Every elevated emotion she sustains becomes a brushstroke painting the version of herself she's becoming. Love, joy, trust. Compassion, these are not fleeting feelings, but states of being she practices daily until they become natural, automatic, and embodied. As she continues to practice emotional alchemy, her perception of life changes completely. She no longer sees challenges as punishments, but as opportunities to refine her frequency. Every obstacle becomes a test of emotional coherence. Can she stay in love even when things fall apart? Can she remain grateful when there's no visible reason to be? The more she practices, the stronger her emotional resilience becomes. She realizes that her true power is not in controlling circumstances, but in mastering her internal state regardless of them. The queen begins to feel emotions that once seemed reserved for rare moments: peace, wonder, wholeness, as her new baseline. She feels connected to something larger, a field of intelligence that supports her every step. Her emotions no longer depend on the external world. The external world now depends on her emotions. What once felt like coincidence now feels like design, and what once felt like waiting now feels like becoming. Emotion, she realizes, is the frequency through which she creates worlds. The silent force that turns imagination into form and dreams into living reality. There comes a sacred moment in the queen's journey when she'll no longer seeks transformation, she becomes it. The years of searching, healing, and awakening have led her here, to the place where the crown was never lost but forgotten. Reclaiming the throne is not about ruling over others or controlling life. It is about remembering sovereignty, the divine authority that comes from knowing she is the creator of her own reality. The throne is not a seat in the outer world. It is a state of consciousness within her, where she is no longer defined by her past or confined by her circumstances. The reclamation begins when she understands that the identity she once wore, the woman who doubted, who feared, who waited, was only a temporary role in a much greater play. Those stories served a purpose. They taught her compassion, humility, and resilience. But now they have done their job. To reclaim her throne, she must release them completely. She no longer identifies as the wounded one seeking healing, but as the whole being who has always been complete. This is not arrogance. It is remembrance. The queen sees clearly that every time she believed she was broken, she was simply believing a story her mind told. The truth was never gone. It was hidden behind layers of survival, waiting for her to see through the illusion. The first act of reclaiming the throne is self-sovereignty. She takes full responsibility for her energy, her choices, her reactions. She no longer blames others for her pain, nor looks to them for her peace. She understands that no one can make her feel anything unless she allows it. This realization is freedom. It means that her emotional state is hers to command, her energy hers to protect. When she feels triggered, she pauses, breathes, and observes, not as a victim, but as a ruler who chooses how to respond. Every time she does this, she strengthens her power. She becomes unshakable because her sense of worth no longer depends on anyone or anything outside of her. In this state, she begins to live from creation rather than reaction. The queen no longer waits for the world to show her evidence before she believes. She believes first and allows the world to catch up. She knows that the universe is always responding to her vibration, not her words, not her wishes, but her state of being. So she begins to cultivate that state intentionally. Each morning she wakes not as someone chasing her dreams, but as someone embodying them. She visualizes her ideal life not as a fantasy, but as a memory of what already exists in the field of potential. Her focus becomes her throne room, sacred, intentional, disciplined. What she thinks about, she brings about, and she guards her thoughts like treasures. She no longer entertains doubt because she understands that doubt is simply misplaced energy. She redirects it toward trust, faith, and creation. Reclaiming the throne also means merging thought and feeling into unity. She has learned through experience that thinking about change is not enough. She must feel it into existence. When she aligns her mind's vision with her heart's emotion, she enters the state of coherence where miracles occur. In this state, her energy is not scatter.